Hello everyone, this is Professor Hill. This is a short video for our class Introduction to Ethics, Philosophy 2306 here at St. Philip's College. This is the Spring 2018 online version. It's Thursday, April the 12th, 2018. We're in week 12 of our class, and we're looking at morality, ethics, IHL, which is where we pick up with this case study for the week on a drone strike and a decision whether or not to order the drone strike or to pass and let a high valued target go because there are innocent civilians in and around the area. And it's difficult to ascertain how much collateral damage there will be, which is the term we use for civilian or innocent casualties being injured or killed because of the explosion of the drone strike. So we're looking at a couple of different aspects of the decision, what weighs in, what are the factors we're balancing. And I want to come back to this one particular aspect of our case study, which is the situation is that there are high-valued targets inside a house. There's a drone circling overhead. It can send down a missile, and it can stop the folks who are inside, who are positively identified terrorists, who are now actively preparing suicide vests to go carry out an attack. Now, they have identified the people. They can see that they're creating the vests, but they don't know where they're going to go. They don't know what their plans are, which is lending a sense of urgency to saying, look, we need to send in the drone strike now and stop this. But there are innocent people in and around the area, and they're trying to get a collateral damage estimate, a CDE, about how many people would be killed. Now, I have to tell you, the information here, and this is kind of an epistemology question, the information they have is they know for sure the people that are inside the house, they know how many people there are, and they have very high confidence that if they send a missile down, they'll kill the people in the house. But they don't have an exact number in terms of the collateral damage estimate. They develop these rings, concentric circles leading out from the detonation point. And how many people are passing through, how many people are inside these rings. And they run calculations. They use this software to try to sort out, well, if they're inside this ring around it, what are the odds of them being killed? What are the odds of them being injured? What's the total number of victims? And the decision makers are trying to balance this other aspect as well, which is, I think, an interesting kind of philosophical point, which is, let's say you've got these 6 high-valued targets inside. They're preparing the bombs. You know you're going to get those 6 people. And let's say even there's as many as 20 innocent civilians, completely innocent victims, just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, that are also, given your estimate, given your collateral damage estimate, are going to be killed. So you have this kind of initial balancing act you're trying to do, which is, well, 6 terrorists, high value, but 20 innocents. Is that a good enough? Is killing 20 innocent people worth getting these 6 bad guys that are really bad? But then they take into account another thing, because these are actual people. The 20, the 6, we can see them. We know that chances are there's high confidence in the fact that they'll be killed by the explosion. But here's this other wrinkle, which is the folks inside the house are preparing suicide vests. They could be preparing right now to get in a car, drive to a crowded shopping mall or some other soft target, where they might kill 80, 90, 100, who knows how many people. Now, the professional judgment of whether or not to make this call has to kind of take that into account as well, because that's a very real risk. We can see that there's a high probability that this is what they're doing and that lots of people, dozens, are at risk of being killed from the detonation of the suicide vest. But now we've introduced this element of potential deaths. People who may or may not be injured or killed. Because here's the other thing. You can't just say, well, on this side of the ledger, we have the 6 bad guys. We want them. They're bad. And on this side, we have the 20, and then kind of add to it, well, that's 20 real people, but let's say 100 potential victims. Those potential victims are not the same as these real victims. Precisely because, for example, let's be clear about this, the folks inside, the terrorists who are putting on the vests, they might, if you decide not to order the strike, they might get the suicide vest together, all get in a van to drive to some crowded shopping mall, but then on the way there, the bombs go off by accident, unintended, and it kills no one but themselves. Now, I got to tell you, that happens. Bombers, not professionals, their bombs they go off accidentally. They sometimes kill only themselves. And so suddenly then, in that scenario, let's say things had progressed that way, then there are 0 people who are killed at a shopping mall because they never actually get there. So when we're talking about the 6 and the 20, that's one thing. The 100 who are potential victims are not real victims. And so then the question becomes, well, how do we weigh that in? Are they what? 2/3 of a victim? I mean, what you have to do is, I think, approach it from the point of view of an all things considered approach. What's the totality of the circumstances, including these 20 people who we think would be innocent victims killed by us by ordering this attack, and we can see them and count them. And when you build in to your judgment this calculation about potential victims, you have to realize that you're making estimates because you don't know the future. You're trying to make this as precise as possible to get the best information as possible. But it's not even just the best information in terms of like counting people. It's also, how do we weigh and balance potential losses versus, again, not even actual losses, because the 20 are still potential because you don't know what might happen. It's just that there's a higher confidence that the 20 we can see and we're about to send a bomb to are going to be killed, and that this 100 at the mall, they're in the same boat. They may or may not be killed, just like the 20, but you have much lower confidence. But again, you can still have pretty high confidence. I mean, these guys are putting on the vests. They're getting ready to get in the car and go, unless you stop them. But again, it just becomes, your confidence, though, is much lower because you don't know what may or may not happen. There's more factors involved. They got to get down the road. They got to get to a mall. They might be stopped on the way. They might get a flat tire. You never know what's going to happen. So the further you get away from this, the more difficult it is to estimate what is that collateral damage. So we got to put that into our calculations as well, because what we're trying to do is sort out, and look, people have to make these decisions. These are very real situations. People make these decisions. I've had students in class. I had a student in class who was a collateral damage estimator. That was his job, was to sort this thing out. And he talked in class about the fact that it wasn't his job to make the decision But he knew that based on the information that he was passing along to superior officers, he said, oh, yeah, I could pretty much tell what they were going to do or not do based on the number. I kind of could tell when it was too high or whether it was acceptable. He goes, sometimes because we had very strict rules we were operating under, sometimes there's this kind of fudge factor for judgment. But the question was, did he feel like he was, and this was not about think, this was about feel. We asked him how he felt about the job. He said he felt comfortable doing it. He knew it was part of the job when he signed up. He thought he was, again, serving his country, doing it honorably. This was an important role. When we asked him what he thought about using the collateral damage system that was in place, he said that there were obviously some restrictions about what he could say or not say, but that he thought it was very worked out. And this was an interesting comment, that it was the best system currently available given our technology. And I said to him, that's good to hear, but I'd also like to think it was the best system given our development in terms of professional moral judgment. Because you got to remember, all the technology, all the numbers, all that information feeds into a human being who has to make a decision, a moral decision, as well as a legal one. So, I got to tell you, that's a complicated thing to do. I personally try to give great deference to the members of our military that have to make these decisions and make these judgment calls. They're doing it based upon experience, knowledge, study, training, policies set by our civilian government. It's a complicated business. So, what would you do? That's the thing. That's our case study. Would you order the strike or say, take a pass and hope for the best? Because, and then of course, then again, why? What's the decision? Not just what's the decision, but what's it based upon? Is it based upon this kind of consequentialist thinking? We're weighing and balancing outcomes? Or is there a rule that governs your decision making? Because again, we're talking about our moral judgments. Did you do it or not, and why? I can tell you, I have known people whose position is not one innocent civilian. That's an outlier position, but it's a pacifist one. It's an absolute position. And there are some people that hold to it, as difficult as that may be. Other people say, no, look, there are some situations in which I think it's going to be appropriate to use state-sanctioned violence. But what are the circumstances? And again, what's it based upon? So, big questions, lots to think about. And I'll get up some more tomorrow as well. Today's Thursday, the 12th. I want to look at a different aspect of this case tomorrow. I wanted to focus primarily today on the whole thing about you got remembering that even the 20, even the ones we can see that are in the line of fire, there's still potential victims that we have high confidence are going to be killed, but we don't know for sure. Some may or may not survive for a variety of reasons. But as you get further and further away from it, a potential victim, maybe at a shopping center, maybe not. Maybe that's numbers 80, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 150, no one knows. Because it's so hard to try to make a reasonable estimate about it. How do we weigh and compare? How do we weigh and balance and compare those different types of potential victims? Some that are very close to the action and to the decision, some which are much further away in terms of possible injury or death. It's a lot to try to weigh and balance. But that's what this is about. That's what ethics is about. It's why we have IHL guidelines. It's why we have in-theater rules of engagement. It's why we spend time worrying about this, precisely because it's important. That's the message for the day. Talk to you again soon. Good luck. Contact me if I can be of any help. Take care. Bye-bye.